welcome to the bonus material for He is a Porn Addict. Now what? This is the eighth question that we're talking about today. We take this time beyond the episode you heard to get deeper into the nuances of the question that we're talking about. And we're talking about gaslighting now. We talked about what it was in the opening piece of this, but you, towards the end, started to talk about confabulation, Tony. And while it sounds like what you do to inflate a bounce house, um,
That's good.
I'm sure it means something else.
Yeah, it also sounds like a fun board game. Like, who doesn't want to play
Yeah,
confabulation,
exactly.
right? Yeah, I can picture the box and all the kids around the table all excited, right? And you yell at
Hungry, hungry
confabulation
hippos
when you're
meets
playing,
confabulation. Yes.
right? Okay, so I talk about this a lot. I was going to say far too much, but then I wanted you to then say, no, Tony, you don't. It's amazing.
No,
But I
no,
don't.
Tony, you
But
don't.
right?
It's
Oh,
amazing.
please stop. Thank you.
I got the
Um,
notes.
Okay, right. Okay. But again, what it is, and once I feel like once you see this concept, you're aware of it, you can't unsee it. And I really, some of my proudest moments are, my kids' first steps, or when they graduated high school, or getting married, or when my own clients use the word confabulation correctly, because it is it just makes so much sense. So it's this process where people create these plausible, but they are fictional stories to fill in these gaps of memory. And we all do it. That's why I love this concept. We fill in the gaps of memory, but usually they're not these dramatic "I was right and you were wrong" things like all the time. Usually it's oh man, I thought you said 10 minutes, it was really 5 minutes. And we have a chuckle. And then but in my mind I'm like, they really said 5 minutes. But then if you went and watched the game footage, maybe they really said 10. You don't know, because we all are just hearing things in real time. We're making decisions, we're making judgments. But confabulation, though, is when you really feel like you're more emotionally immature, or even bordering on the good old narcissistic traits and tendencies. It's a completely distorted lens. It's this like false self, and it's where you develop this in childhood. Gaslighting is a childhood defense mechanism, because most likely you grew up in a environment where you didn't see people taking ownership of things. You didn't see, oh, my bad, that, I did that.
Mm-hmm.
That wasn't said by parents a lot. And so you would do anything to avoid being wrong, because if you were wrong, you're going to hear about it. You're going to get in trouble. And so then it wasn't you. The dog ate your homework. Well, I wouldn't have done it if you hadn't have done this other thing. Instead of just saying, I did it, I'm so sorry. And so then because what it does, it allows you to maintain this grandiose self-perception, justify your self-centeredness. And then because people need to eliminate any information that challenges their narrative or their self-perception. And so then it could not have been the way that you think it is, because that paints them in a bad light. And the reason I go into confabulation is because when you really start to study confabulation, it's why gaslighting is so powerful, because you can, there isn't a measurement tool to measure this, but sometimes I give examples of, it's as if somebody came up to me and said, how's the kid you had when you were in high school with that one girl? And it's like, I couldn't even get dates in high school, right? And then they show me a picture of me holding the kid. And let's say that and I kind of have, and I might have said this on an earlier bonus episode, but I have a very real example of a client long ago that was something we talked about. But I was seeing them before they had any kids, but then they had
Mm-hmm.
this happen in high school. And it was just kind of said offhand. Then I get to see these people 15 years later as a marriage therapist now, and they have kids. And the curiosity of me is I want to know more about that story. I'm curious. So then when I have the wife one-on-one and I say, hey, do you have much contact with the kid from that he had in high school with the lady? And this woman in my office almost breaks down crying, saying, she's like, okay, he doesn't even acknowledge it, and his parents say, well, we don't really talk about it. And then I talk to him, and then I try to bring it up organically, and he's just like, what is she telling you? And so then I feel nuts. I feel absolutely crazy when I think, I know we talked about this in detail 15 years ago. But then what confabulation is like is that if you look at it, now that he has kids, and he has a few of them, and he understands what it means to be a father, it's like he can't have not provided that to a little tiny human being when he, that he had in high school that then he just lost complete contact with, didn't have financial support for.
Hmm.
So then it's like his brain has confabulated the narrative that I didn't do that. And then it believes it. So then, so then I was being gaslit because you could have showed him a picture. I said, can we text the girl? Like, I mean, can we, and let's see, and you want to see it. And the picture would probably look exactly like him. And, and then to the person that has confabulated that memory, and this is why gaslighting is so powerful, is that he would say, I don't know how you did that magic or voodoo that you did in this picture and that they look like me, but there's zero part of me that did that. And so then you start to question your own reality. So, I mean, I still, even as I'm telling you the story, part of me is like, because it did happen, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure that that is the guy that we had talked about 15 years ago. So anyway, that's why whenever we talk about gaslighting, there's different types, and there's the gaslighting of I'm even halfway aware of something, but it's like it'd be easier to just deny it and to go big on it because it'll all blow over. Or I'm doing it to protect her because I know it wasn't. I said a different thing. You must be wrong. And if she's like, okay, then I'm like, oh, okay, I feel better. So that's more of the gaslighting, this more pedestrian version. But that
Hmm.
version has that side of confabulation is maddening because the more you argue with that person because they know that they're right and you're wrong, then they will go bigger and bigger to tell you how dumb you are until you finally go, I think I might be crazy. So there's my opening remarks. I turn back to you, Mr. Shea.
Uh, I I like that because in looking back, I always make the joke when I do a podcast as an interviewee that I should have had a doctorate in gaslighting before I left high school because I
Okay,
was
yeah.
so good at it by that point. Um, how much of does it need to be a conscious manipulative effort to be gaslighting?
And how so? What context?
Well, I look back and find a lot of my rationalization, a lot of my flat out lying, I guess. I think I just did it to do it. I don't
Yeah,
know that there was, I guess I'd say I don't know that there was uh, horrible intent behind it. It's just something
it
I
just
did. And
was.
I gotta say, I look at some of the memes and whatnot that people put up on Instagram and Facebook and elsewhere. A lot of betrayed women who, if your man looks at porn at all, he is an addict because the moment you look at porn, and I feel like some of these situations they paint are so dire that it's almost like they're gaslighting themselves.
Yeah,
The way that I used to gaslight myself, or am I gaslighting myself now thinking, I wasn't this guy, I wasn't this guy? You're describing a much worse person than I was. Um,
yeah.
if he looks at women, he wants to cheat with women. No, that was
No,
never
right?
me. No
Yeah,
matter
no,
how no matter how scuzzy it might be that I was a porn addict and all the other stuff I might have done in my life, I didn't do this, I
yeah.
think, or am I trying
No,
to remember myself as a
oh,
better guy than I
okay.
was?
I feel like that's a fair point, but this is where I almost feel like, in one sense, boy, if you get really kind of cool and deep into the mechanisms of memory in general, part again that confabulation is when the gaps in memory are filled with these grandiose perceptions, or I couldn't have been bad or wrong. But there's also, I mean, the power of intention, and I'm not talking about like The Secret or things like that, but if you can practice building better implicit memory. So when I think of going to Disneyland over Christmas, every time I bring up that memory, it's almost like this flash memory, and then I fill in the gaps of, man, it was fun, and there were we had all my family there, and the rides were good, but then somebody else can say, okay, the lines were so long, and the food was very expensive, and the Airbnb had a weird thing that it would scratch the bottom of your car, and and the neighbors were loud, and so you can create And the reason I give that example is I can create this version of where I wasn't that bad of a person. And I would still rather have somebody go down that path than the I was a horrible piece of garbage. So there's a little bit of confabulation that happens that we have a little bit of control over. So even if it is, am I, if you're saying, am I gaslighting myself into thinking I wasn't as bad of a person? There's a part of me that says, okay, that's also called positive psychology, or trying to focus on the good. But I feel like that once somebody is in recovery or feels like they have a significant amount of success, whatever we define that is, behind them, man, I want people to do more of that confabulating, that I was actually just a human being and those things were happening, or I had a childhood that I didn't know how to deal with, and that was my escape or my coping. So I wasn't a bad person. I was a person who then did those things. So I really like
Right.
that, I feel like, yeah, by definition, one could say I'm gaslighting, but that's why I almost want to use the power of positive confabulation, which is a phrase that I don't think has ever been used.
Right.
But then I feel like the gaslighting as the grandiose narcissist, or the incredibly emotionally immature that could not have done it that way, because that means they might have done a thing wrong, and so they're afraid of even being human, because it's okay to do things wrong or get something wrong, or uh, unfortunately hurt someone's feelings. That's part of the human experience. So I really like your question. So it's almost like, okay, as long as you're doing it to be cool, Josh, then it's okay, you
Oh,
know?
well, all right then.
But at first I thought you were talking about, because I get people that will talk about pathological or compulsive liars. And then, because that's a form of the gaslighting, where when people are
Yeah.
like, yeah, but I just do it. And it's like, okay, well, that's because of that. As a child, you got away with it. It got you out of things. And so then sometimes people say my immediate response is almost a lie, even when I know that that isn't the truth. And then you can almost look at that as it's this immediate protection of your ego. um, and so then but when somebody's aware of that, then they can start to confront it or put a pause in before they respond, because they're gonna lie or that sort of thing too. Yeah.
It's funny you say that because I was, as a child in school, and maybe this has nothing to do with it, but 9, 10, 11, before I discovered pornography, I was the world's biggest liar.
Mm,
I would lie to impress people. I would lie to get out of trouble. I would lie, you know, just because I did.
yeah.
And I think a lot of that grew out of safety that I was
Yeah,
concerned of when
I
I
can
was a
see that.
kid. But I think that it became almost a power thing. And I was safer to tell you what reality was.
Yeah, because that's a good
It was
point.
safer for me to tell you what reality was so that I could live there. It wasn't,
Mm,
I guess I go back to these memes where it sounds like uh, people who are porn addicts, people who are gaslighters, that they like, every night sit at the kitchen table hatching their plans for the next
right.
day.
Yeah.
And that's one thing I guess I've never done. I've never had if I've gaslit, it's out of my own safety. It's
Hmm.
out of my own fear for what's going to happen to me. It's never been a sport of manipulation. It's never been a uh, intentionally mean thing. It's been a survival instinct.
Well, that's why I say where it is a childhood defense mechanism that then carries into adulthood. And so I'm with you. And I like what you're saying there, because I think people that will say, but he knows, right? Or basically it's this, he must be sitting there with a dry erase board of like, okay, so if she says this, how do I get out of this one? No, you
Right.
did it. No, I didn't. The dog did. Like he's got these list of things that he's gonna memorizing, and cut to a scene from Rocky, and he's like, sitting there like sweating, and the person's grilling him, and he's like, gaslighting, gaslighting. He's got to get good at it. But no, it comes from childhood, and the way to overcome it is to then be aware of it. And then I still feel like it's even one of those things where the proverbial path of enlightenment is we don't know what we don't know, then we know, but we still do, and we do that for a long time, and we get to beat ourselves up, and I wish I didn't know, and all those things. And then eventually we go to, okay, now I do the better thing more than I don't, and that's where it's like, I did it again. But sometimes I'm going to take ownership of it, and other times I'm like, I can't even believe I just won't do it again. I won't do it next time. And then eventually we become. And now it's like I live in this world of truth. And if I do impulsively or compulsively lie, then I stop myself and I'm like, you know what? That is not true. I'm noticing that I wanted to tell you that I used to be 6'5" and now I'm a mere 5'8". So I think that one's going to come out, you
Yeah,
know?
since the accident.
Yes. That's
Um,
right.